Okay. Hello. Welcome everybody to this session. My name is Cesar Hernandez, and I'm really happy to be here. Feel free to send as many questions as you may have during the session. Nowadays that we are on online conference, I think the value that we get most when we are attending a live event is to throw questions as much as possible. So thank you again, and let me share my screen. Okay, so again, you know, when I was preparing this session, one of the first things that people usually ask when after attending a conference or when you are you know, trying to start something from your own, or you want to embrace a project that you really like much, the first question that we always get is, hey, how can I jump into that project, or how can I contribute to open source, like in this case, right? So hopefully this session is gonna be really helpful for you. A little bit of who am I? My name is Cesar Hernandez again, and I am a senior software engineer for Tomitribe. You can read the other bullet there, but I like always describe myself as you know, as a developer who likes to learn and share what I learn. So this is really engaging for me in my career, how much I have learned by also sharing what I have, and I think that's one of the spirits under open source and all around. So without further ado, you know, you may be hearing this term. This is the first time. Feel free to say, yes, it's my first time. Just saying a +1, and the moderator is gonna manage that for you. But feel free to raise your hand and say +1 if you are new, totally new to open source. And I think that's the slide that you will find in most of the all around the web, right? And I pasted this too because it makes the difference between open source and also open source software, right? You're reading there that the slight difference is when you actually talk about software, it's code. Open source can be something more than just software, right? But this session is focused on open source software. Let me go next. Okay, so why should I be involved, Cesar, in open source? Why I will want to join? Well, that actually is a question that I answer with another question, and sometimes the people have different motivations. I put just 4 here. You may have a different one, but it can say, for example, it is a resume, a portfolio enhancement. More people nowadays looks or search for a reference or on GitHub accounts and what projects are you being actively involved. So all this kind of reference is helpful. Also, for example, if you use Git or another repo to show your work, that's also feasible. And these are the top 4 answers that I usually get. When I ask the question, why do you want to join the open source? Also for business opportunity, you may be interesting, but this is just one part of that, right? This is not the entire panorama. If you also looking for an expert, you may find websites that allow you to present your expertise in some particular topic in any of these platforms. So even if you have your own company, but also you want to provide some extra services, or you want to extend what you offer as a professional, there are platforms for you. Once you learn things from an open source project that you really like, you can start actually getting money from that, right? In the open source, you help for free, but then it can be also commercial interest. For example, how to use open source for when a company is donating source code. That happens quite often nowadays. I will say every now and then we hear that X company open source Y software or Y application. Then also from the community point of view, there are many type of peoples involved, and actually there are social norms that needs to be followed. So open source before the pandemic was 100% ready to be totally asynchronous and displayed all around in different time zones. So that is the beautifulness of open source. And how open source works, who is in charge of that is the second most frequent question I have heard. And I try to put this picture because, you know, if you are familiar with it, you will say, okay, there is one person, yeah, you know, moving around their fingers and say, okay, that's the next move that this project is going to do. But actually, when you start contributing to open source, you end up realizing that that is not the true, right? So the governance within an open source project actually is you as a user, you as a contributor, active contributor, you as a tester, as a committer also. You like to promote certain open source project, you provide sessions in this kind of events. So again, that's how the open source works. And then we have this concept when people ask, okay, how can I be a committer, right? Is that something so difficult, something that is way far away from me? And the reality is that no, we all can be committers. I myself in open source projects that I saw like a really Everest kind of complexity, ended up being a committer, and it's just a matter of jumping and say, hey, I want to contribute, how can I help? But the perception that only 3 super smart people are the ones behind an open source project, that is not true, right? And the decisions, how they are made, also reflects that, because the decisions are made as a community. There is a consensus about what is going to be added in the next version, what is going to be removed, what is going to be updated. So this is the first part of the session, and when I try to summarize many whys about the open source, and then the next questions start with the how, right? And okay, I'm convinced I'm gonna start my open source project, or I'm gonna jump into an open source project, I wanna join to an open source project. Then you need to be aware of things like the following. In the how, in the sense of governance, you need to be aware about the licensing. If you are going to start to create an open source project, the first thing you will want to know is, okay, which license I'm going to use. And if you are going to join, this is really helpful. So there are more than 82. This number is a really big number, 82 licenses to choose from. But I like to put the top 3 that most common licenses that you can find on GitHub, for example. In this case, it's MIT, Apache 2.0, and GNU. So if you want independent guidance on this, you might find this really useful. So again, you can go to chooselicense.com and you can find the information there. Okay, then in terms of type of tools that you may want to use, you also can have different type of tooling like it that nowadays I think we are really familiar. Because this is related to how to contribute to open source in Java, I think this is really important. Let me check the chat. If you have questions, please send them out. Let me open the chat to not go all along the slides and not answer your question you may have. Let me open here the chat. Okay, we don't have questions. Okay, let's continue. So these are many tools that you have nowadays. Maven list, it was kind of the root piece for collaboration. A couple decades ago, I will say it, we have our IRC. Now we have the modern IRC that is Slack. But again, is or JIRA, if you're familiar with this, when you can actually hook up inside of a GitHub project or a repository, you can add the link to a chat where you can have interaction with that community. So again, this is just example of tools that you have available when you're talking about open source. And again, Zoom, Hangouts, Skype, it's available. It's not so common to find open source projects that use this frequently, but in the Java ecosystem, there are two big projects. One is MicroProfile, and another is Jakarta EE, who actually use these video telecommunication sims to provide a status about what's going on. Obviously, there are newsletter, official announcement, but there is also community calls, as we call them, in which we invite people to join and have this interaction directly and synchronously in a video call. So we have that option too in the Java ecosystem too. In terms of okay, Cesar explained me why may I be interesting or why people usually are interested in joining. Then we saw the how in terms of tool sets and also in terms of licenses. And then there are other more aspects that you need to consider. Which programming language do you feel comfortable? You are interested? This is particular. Let me give you an example. At some point, I was really I will say 5 years ago or more, I was really looking into, the container when everything was starting. I was playing around and I say, okay, that Docker thing, it sounds really good 6 years ago. And let's start jumping. And then I realized that it was not written in Java, right? And then I said, okay, I need to make a key decision here. Do I want to keep improving in Java? Do I want to go in the Go side of the fence? So that kind of things are, this kind of decisions are driven by these options. So technology domain is the same. Leadership and governance and the community culture. You may find, depending on your location, where the project, you may find some more communities friendly. We like to categorize these 4 types. Friendly, everything is fine, it's the happy path for everyone. Fast and furious, it means, those kind of communities when you are just joining the mailing list and you receive release 0.1 done today. Then there are a lot of conversations, release 2.0 made next week. And you say, whoa, I'm still even trying to catch up with version number 1. So expert only is another one, is something that it will vary from technology domain. It's not the same, for example, depending on your technology domain, how you join to X or Y project. So you will find that. And this nasty, I added here because, there are some open source projects that have this not so friendly approach. I haven't got experience yet, but I have many people who had reached to me and say, okay, Cesar, is this common on open source? And I say, no, that's not totally common. That's not unfriendly at all, right? So you need to be aware of the culture, right? Before joining, you do a little bit of research, look how people is interacting, and if you feel comfortable with that, and you read the guidelines of that community, and also the umbrella that is hosting that project, you feel free to join. In terms of type of contributions, there are many. You can start with open pull requests, commenting on pull requests, reviewing pull requests. That's something straightforward. You just need, for reviewing a PR, you just need to go to the PR, download everything, test it, and it's run fine. You provide feedback, and in that, just one example, you learn a lot, and I mean a lot. You are becoming an expert in how to build from source that particular framework or that particular piece of software. Then you have documentation, workshop, testing. Continuous integration is something that I always have really appealing. I like a lot, to have this kind of interaction with infrastructure now that everything is on the cloud. So I have really found a place for, in particular, open source project to join and contribute and do something related with that. And that helped me to, to keep my knowledge up to date. And then I can apply it on other projects. Also, you can be a moderator. Why not? You can start joining a project and say, hey guys, I want to take the minutes from these sessions, from these calls. And as a moderator, you start learning what the people is interacting, what are the hot topics, what are the agendas for next meetings, for next, decisions. And from there, you can start actively, you are already actively contributing, but then you can start moving into a more code-oriented approach, which is something that I think we all as developers love. And at the end, what it matters is that any substantive action that has an output is what matters in open source, right? Let me give you examples. this is the first project that I want to show you about how you can see the different aspect of tooling and what we have seen before. So Apache TomEE, what's Apache TomEE? Apache TomEE is, I would like to describe like Apache Tomcat plus Java Enterprise. It was Java EE, as we used to call it, Java EE Web Profile Certified. We are working as a community for Jakarta EE9 for Jakarta, which is now the name of Java Enterprise. It's built from Apache components, and you hear the word Apache. Okay, I have here a lot of the word Apache, Cesar. That means that is part of the Apache Foundation. More on that in the next slide. And the project has been successful in many different ways. When I talk about Apache before the name of the project, that means that this project is hosted inside of Apache Foundation. And then is when you, maybe you want to start an open source project, you maybe at some point will want to put your project under the umbrella of a foundation. There are many foundations. This is just one of the two we are going to see today. And you can see here the size of that foundation. I bet that many of the software that you use on your daily basis appears on that slide. So that gives you an example about how strong is that foundation, and most important, what support that open source project has already inherited by being part of that foundation. And the Apache way is one of the core principles. Remember the friendly, the tech only, all that kind of approach in terms of community. Well, the Apache way is something summarized like this. When usually in a company charges, you have the CTO, the CEO, and then you go down, 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 down. Here is an inverse. The most that has the more power to make decisions are the users. Then you have the contributors who are actively involved in the code, and then you have committers who have basically access to merge the contributions, and then you have the PM chair of that specific project, and then you have the Apache board. So this is the Apache way of how things are being governed, the governance on Apache Foundation. Then in terms of tooling for Apache TomEE, we have a dev and a user mail list. We use JIRA for tracking. We have Slack. We have GitHub mirroring the SVN repository, so you can follow the pull request model integration if that's where you feel more comfortable. Technical prerequisites, Java, I will say it, and then you start, depending on what your point of interest in, you start moving into Maven, Git, knowing background of Jakarta EE and or JUnit, Archelian, and the list goes on, but that doesn't mean that you need to know everything. Because it will depend on the contribution type. And you are seeing some examples here that we already mentioned at the beginning of the session. Workshop is something really useful. You learn something, then you write a blog post, you are contributing, you learn something, you provide a workshop that also is contribution, and you can review PRs and so on. And how I do that, Cesar? Okay, I want to review a PR. I want to create a JIRA ticket for a bug file I found. So there are processes, right? There are processes. We try to be as agile as possible, but also provide guidance to not be only you in a while with a knife trying to say, okay, this is the project that Cesar was telling me, and I don't know what to do. So there are documentation that explain you step by step what are, depending on your interest in, how you can fork along your branch, how you can create JIRAs, and so on. But most importantly, remember, when I talk about the word community, right? Friendly community. This is a TomEE Hack Day that we did by the end of 2019, in which we managed to gather many Spanish-spoken communities around the world. We have people from Spain, United States, Guatemala, Colombia, Ecuador, República Dominicana. It was great to see all these contributors, users, and also people who was the first time having interaction with the project. We also had on the session David Blevins, who is one of the founders of the project, and it was fun. We present, we share, and then we hack a little bit on the project, how you can build the project from scratch. And you know, Tomitribe being the company who provides support for Apache Tomcat, Apache TomEE, and ActiveMQ, it obviously it has this retribution to the open source project by recognizing people from the community, right? In this case, there is a badge system that you get recognition as a contributor. For example, here for your first commit, or for example, if you create a video demo or showing something related with the project, or also if you have translation. Actually, Daniel Diaz is one of the, I will say, he helped a lot, has been helping a lot to translate the documentation from English to Portuguese. David Salter had created many videos, and in this case, Patricia from Colombia, it has been also learning and increasing the contribution within the community. We have only 4 minutes. I'm gonna jump to the next project. Feel free to send any questions you have, and I will happy to answer them. For MicroProfile, that's the second example of open source project. MicroProfile is basically, this is the first time you're hearing, is basically Java Enterprise, Java Enterprise ready, be ready for microservices. It's like an extension someone like to call for microservices from the Java EE or now Jakarta EE point of view in terms of the platform. Is supported by the communities, an open source project. All these companies that you see here on the right side of the slides are the ones supporting the project also, and that provides application portability across runtimes. There are different APIs, but the most important part is that in this case, this project is not within Apache Foundation, it's within Eclipse Foundation. And again, Eclipse Foundation is big. Eclipse is not just an IDE. I think that's the first thing that you learn when you join EclipseCon. So yeah, it's a really huge supporter of many open source projects. Who is in charge? Eclipse Foundation is the top level project. What are how the committers get that level? By merit. How are decisions made? By a consensus, and it can host more different type of licenses. Not just the Eclipse license. And then you have the tooling. For MicroProfile, it's a little bit different from TomEE. For example, in this case, it uses a lot of Google Groups for calendar, JIRA, and in this case, the Zoom biweekly community calls that I was talking previously. Technical prerequisites, the same that we discussed. And in terms of community, again, there is a lot of embracement and friendship, I will say, for people to join, learn, and contribute. So feel free to jump into the project, any of these two projects, and say hi. Last but not least, this is a picture that I want to share. When I was around 7 years old, I hadn't got, and still I think I'm not able to make a home run for those who play baseball, but I managed to make a home run by running the entire bases while the other team was goofing around the ball. And that was the point when I learned that you can make home runs in different ways, and in this case you can contribute to open source in more than one way, and that is the message that I hope I was able to share with you today. So feel free to join the mailing list and say hi, how can I contribute? We have the first questions. Let me see here. The first questions, thank you so much for the questions. I'm not a developer, but would like to get involved in open source. What would you suggest I start with? Well, remember the first part of the session, the slides are gonna be available. You can follow me on Cesar HGT or just visit on my Twitter account, Cesar HGT, and I'm gonna post this slide. But at the beginning of this slide, remember those steps, right? What is your technology domain? What are you most interested in that technology domain? And then join one particular project that you like or you find interesting and say, hi, I am not a developer, but I am eager and happy. I heard about this technology and I'm happy to join and help. That's the first step. And I'm pretty sure the community can take you from there to the next level of your involvement inside of that project. Second question, can you recommend Eclipse projects that can be a good starting point for new open source contributors? Of course. I present you one example, MicroProfile. You can join Jakarta EE also, right? And there are many others, Eclipse Che, the Eclipse IDE, Eclipse collection, if you are related with Java also. Let me see. We have another. That's pretty much the two questions that we have. If you have any other question, please send. For the first two questions, hopefully I was able to answer those. And the message is choose, join, raise your hand and say, hi, I want to contribute. How can I help? That's the starting point for everything. We don't have more questions. I think we are just in time. So thank you much for joining the session. Thank you, EclipseCon, for making this a reality. It's my first time in this conference, now in an online format, but I had really fun. And see you around in the open source, right? And feel free to send more questions. My media channels are there. My social media channels are there. And yeah, that's pretty much. Thank you much and have fun for the rest of the conference.